Diane, you're muted. So if you're speaking, you can't be heard. Diane Ellison.
Actually, I think we'll keep everyone muted for now. I'm gonna just pin my video so y'all can see me. And I'd love it if anyone wants to check in and chat. Just post your name and where you're calling in from. It's awesome to see so many folks here.
Sarah?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You do. Good.
Great. For the first part of this, I'm just going to ask everyone to stay muted, and then when we get to Q&A close to the end, then folks can unmute and put questions or put them in chat. Please go ahead and mute for now, or I might mute you if there's background noise, because there's a lot of us. Awesome. It's so good to see so many of you here. I had a sense that we would have more folks on a webinar than usual, given that everyone's at home all the time now. But this is lovely to see. It looks like we've got folks from all over the world. So a couple notes on this. The call is going to be about an hour. I am going to be recording it because there's a number of folks that aren't able to make it, and I want to make sure that they get the recording afterwards. So just be aware of that. Mostly I'll be talking for the first like 35, 40 minutes or so, and then I'll open it up to Q&A and say something quick about a course that is kind of related to this content. And if at any time you've got questions or comments, feel free to post them in chat, and I'll see what I can get to. And I will say that I'm way more used to actually, let me stop my video for a second. I think you guys can see me. I'm way more used to interacting with groups than seeing a whole bunch of faces on the screen. So if I seem awkward or I'm switching back and forth, that's why. Cool. So just to get started, I'm also going to be using a PowerPoint so that there's like a bit of a visual here. We'll see how that works in switching back and forth. So I'm just going to share my screen for the intro. So let's see how we do this best. There might be better ways to do this, but I'm going to go with what I can. Okay, so if you can see this, just a quick introduction. I'm Sarah Ness, and I'm just going to switch back to you. If you are unmuted, please mute because there'll be a otherwise. So a little bit on me. I'm kind of, sorry, let me actually get centered for just a second. So I'm a bit of an authenticity and a presence nerd, in case you can't tell from that intro. And I've helped popularize a practice called authentic relating, which is a set of tools and practices for, at the essence, being more honest with ourselves and others. I don't really think there's a lot of times that we're deliberately inauthentic, but I think there are ways to be more expressed and more empathetic and more connected with those around us. So I've helped found or support more than 80 authentic relating and circling communities worldwide, taught 900 or more students authentic leadership and communication skills. And I work at a company called Authentic Revolution, the founder and chief catalyst. So that's me. And to go. Okay, so I want to give you all a quote real quick first. As we're thinking about this webinar is largely going to be on, a lot of the events I've seen on lately are how do we connect with people that we're only connected with over Zoom? How do we connect with our work teams? How do we, connect with family remotely? But there's a really big topic, which is how do we connect with the people that are closest to us? Our friends, our family, the people that all of a sudden we're having to spend all day with. I'm actually curious, like, feel free to post in chat, like, who you're quarantined with, who are the only people that you can see in person or that you're seeing regularly. And one of the things that happens is that these connections that we have they can move from being really nourishing to being a bit draining because we're around people all the time. There's this beautiful quote that I have up on screen, which is, we define the quality of the connection in terms of whether the connective tissue between individuals is life-giving or life-depleting. Like a healthy blood vessel that connects parts of our body, a high-quality connection between two people allows the transfer of vital nutrients. It is flexible, strong, and resilient. In a low-quality connection, a tie exists. People communicate, they interact, they may even be involved in interdependent work, but the connective tissue is damaged. With a low-quality connection, there is a little death in every interaction. So, to play off of that, there's a couple points on this. And I'm going to put this up for a second. I'm just going to click back to video so y'all can have not just a screen to stare at while I talk. Okay, coming back here. There is a quote by, I don't know how many people here have heard of Esther Perel, but she is a psychologist that I absolutely love that studies how desire happens and how people manage long-term relationships. And she has this quote that love rests on two pillars, surrender and autonomy. Our need for togetherness exists alongside our need for separateness. Too much merging eradicates the separateness of two distinct individuals. So even though we're with these people that we're spending time with, and in many cases, I think a lot of us, I know for myself, there's even a lot of beauty in getting to spend more time with my housemate and my partner than I did before, but also there's no distance. And there's no distance, not even from the people around me, but there's also no distance from myself. And just like kind of bring up for a second, like, what is the quality of the connections that you're having with people in your life right now? Like, if you have to put an emotion word, and I'll be asking questions, and don't answer these aloud, but you can post in chat or just kind of consider for yourself. Like, what does it feel like to be connecting with the people around you? My housemate and I are having an experience where we were going for a walk the other day, and we do these kind of regular clearings, which I'll talk about a little later as relational hygiene. We're going on a walk and we're both sharing that, like, we're kind of subtly irritated with each other a bunch because, like, all the little things, like me slamming a door, all of a sudden, like, means so much more. And for me, there's a bit of a different one, which is like, I feel more insecure around him. Something I've noticed is being in so much closeness and connection, I not only can't hide from the other person, but I can't hide from who I am around them. And all of the things that, like, come up in closeness that have been characteristic of past relationships are getting projected onto him. So in my case, I've had a number of housemate situations that were really tough, or where I was asked to leave, or I kind of grew up, my first adult housing situations were in the co-ops, where there's not a ton of private property, and I got used to that. So when I moved in with other people, I was so used to just sharing and being around people all the time that I kind of crossed boundaries a lot. Like, I didn't really understand personal property, and I had a bunch of negative experiences because of that. And now when I'm on around my housemate a bunch, I find myself being nervous and insecure. Like, am I going to do something wrong? It's just these moments of patterns coming up. And I imagine, I'm not sure, but I imagine some of you have this too, where you're starting to, if you really look at the reason that you're interacting with the people around you the way you are, it probably has more to do with past experiences than it does with them in particular, which is, of course, one of the things that can be so complicated in relationship is we're never really interacting with each other. We're interacting with each other and all of the ghosts of our past. So, I'll look at a few things here. That's kind of presenting the case. And I want to talk a little bit on what we can do about it. And there's a few major points that I'm going to cover. First is how to maintain connection with yourself, how to help others maintain connection with themselves, how to set and maintain boundaries, which is kind of the space between us. And then last, how to do like what I call relational hygiene, which is clearing and kind of maintaining this we space that we share. So I'm going to share my screen again. So, maintaining connection with yourself. There's 3 points I'll talk about on this. And the first is making space to clear. So imagine that there's a window between yourself and other people. And over time, that window gets smudged by different moments, different actions that you take, that other people take. And it gets harder to see the other person clearly. Sometimes it can get hard to even see your own reflection in that glass. And you just see the smudges, and the reflection of the person that you used to love looking at is distorted. And so even though oftentimes what we want to do is ask the other person, like, hey, clean up your life. Like, you're doing all of these things that are really not helpful. Actually, a lot of the time, like, what's needed is to figure out how to clean a little bit of our side of the glass first, because we're in connection so often. And one of the things about this is to do some sort of internal work. So really good practices, for instance, The Work by Byron Katie. I'll put a couple of these here. Focusing, which is a practice. The Work by Byron Katie is basically a technique for looking at your beliefs and the way you're seeing other people. Focusing is a practice for just like noticing your internal state and being able to track that. Journaling, meditation, and circling is another good practice for those of you who do that. And there's a platform for that called Connect on my website. But that's a practice of like a relational meditation of getting present with each other and practicing things with each other. So those are some practices of just like things you can do with yourself. Any of those, if you Google them, you'll find them. That will kind of clear some space. And the most important thing in this is really, first of all, taking space from the other person to do this. Something that I discovered, like as I've, kind of been alone and in quarantine, is it's so much more likely for me to prioritize work and prioritize other people rather than spending any time on my own needs. It's like, it feels less important. There's like so many things screaming for my attention, so many people. And I've kind of had to clear out blocks where it's like, I'm going to value time with myself as much as I value it with other people. When I'm scheduling my day, I have to put in time that's like specifically for me. Or if I notice myself being irritated before I bring it to someone else, I have to go and just kind of like talk with myself and figure out what's going on. And sometimes that's just a conversation like, hey, self, like, what is up? Why are you feeling this way? I believe that there are different parts of ourselves that we can dialogue with. So notice, like, what is irritated? What is that part of you want and need? So second technique is gratitude and metta meditations. This is something I've started doing most days when I wake up, is meditating for a couple minutes and then thinking about 3 things I'm grateful for. And then doing what's called a metta meditation. I think this is the right way to say it, which is a loving kindness meditation. Just kind of thinking about the people closest to me, the people in wider networks of my life, and then the people in the world as a whole. And finding like some sort of phrase or mantra that works, like, some, I think traditional ones are something like, may all beings experience peace or happiness, but whatever phrase feels right to me. And the benefit of this is it gets me out of my own head, because it's easy for me to focus on like fear and anxiety right now. And that's just kind of an automatic, like, if self-consciousness is being conscious of the self, making myself conscious of other things is really powerful. And then the last thing is put your face mask on first. So I'm gonna click back to explain that one. So putting your face mask on first is like, if we're thinking of like COVID as a metaphor, I can tell everyone else to put face masks on, right? But if I'm not wearing a face mask, I'm more likely to get everyone else sick. And I think that anxiety works the same way as illness does, really. Like our stress, our difficulty can infect the people around us. And as we're trying to help them make their face masks, we're not wearing one. And so it's like we're constantly infecting them, even as we're trying to help them construct their own barriers to it. So the idea of putting your own face mask on first is like, do first what brings you joy. And I want to say right now, I am very bad at this. So I'm a little bit talking out of my ass, but I've had a lot of people in my life recently who have helped me just like slow down and like take a day to go hike in the woods. Like my housemate and I took yesterday afternoon off and hiked the entirety of the Greenbelt in Austin, which is like a 9-mile hike, just because like there were so many things to do, but setting it aside just for a moment helped us reconnect, helped me reconnect to myself, helped me be less reactive when I got a really difficult share that evening from my partner. So the way I do this is make a list of the things that I know relax and rejuvenate me. And if you don't know what these are, you can even track throughout the day. And after each activity that you do, mark like a +2 to a -2 of energy. Did it give you energy or did it take energy away? And that can help you kind of notice what activities give you energy. But like make a list and just do one of those activities a day. If you don't have time for much, take a walk around the block or sing yourself a song or, you know, have a play fight with somebody. Because one of the things I'm realizing is we're not getting the liminal time that we used to be alone. Like driving between things or transitions or like being away or going to work, that transition time is just gone. And I think that's really a lot of the time kind of like sleep where we used to get to rejuvenate. So if you're feeling more tense than usual, there's a reason, I think. So maybe like take a pause and if you're willing or if this seems useful, just like write down 1 or 2 things that would feel rejuvenating to you that you could actually imagine yourself doing before the end of the day today. Because there's always like what I can do tomorrow, but like what would you do today? Just take a moment for that. And then I'm going to suggest a technique that my friends at the Center for Applied Rationality taught me called Murphy Jitsu. If any of you know Murphy's Law, it's like that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Murphy Jitsu is imagine it's the end of the day. Have you done one of those things? If not, why not? And kind of just do that until you figure out an activity that you can actually imagine doing. And then just notice, like, how do you feel after you do it? I love the people that are putting them in chat. Please do, so we can all get some ideas. I'm saying hot shower, artwork, woodworking. I think of writing poetry, petting a cat, painting and writing, knitting, exercise. Yeah, totally. And these are going to be different for everyone. Sweet. So feel free to keep posting these. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. Next set of things, which is how do you help other people clean their glass? And I know this is very unprofessional to not full screen this, but I'm going with the technology that I understand. Okay, so helping others clean their glass. And when I say helping others, I don't mean making others. So telling someone else, hey, you're stressed or you seem stressed. When we're stressed, that tends to stress us out more. So it can be good to come to someone else with curiosity, oftentimes like a noticing and a question, like, hey, I notice that you've seemed more tense than usual lately, or I noticed that you've been working a lot, or that you've been in your room a lot. And I'm just wondering, like, how are you? Is there anything I can do to support you? So something objective that you notice or how the person seems, and then just like an open question about how they are. Most people respond fairly positively to that. There's a couple different things that I suggest just off the top of my head that you could do. two that you can do. The first two you can do just like one-on-one with the other person. Co-counseling. My housemate and I do this with each other. This is a specific technology. You can look it up. I think it's rc.org, or reevaluation counseling. And it's like at the simplest, it's just like helping someone get into the emotion of what they're feeling and kind of release it, sometimes through laughing, through yawning. But the simplest way that I think about it is like, asking someone about like how this situation is for them and helping them kind of move through it. And the empathy game, which I can explain a little bit better, is an authentic relating game. And I'll send some of these out in an email after the call. But it's basically like you've got two people. One person just shares for about 3 minutes whatever's on their mind, like whatever's most alive for them. And the other person just listens. And then for about a minute, and you can kind of play with these times however you want, for about a minute, if you're the one listening, you reflect. And you reflect as closely as possible exactly what you heard, no interpretation. So the person can hear their words back to them, which is oftentimes really powerful to hear something from somebody else's mouth. It feels like they're speaking the language that's in our heart. And then the other person who was originally speaking gets a couple minutes to clarify, add, reiterate anything that they want. And then I would say what I think I get about them. Like what seems to matter to you is, or it seems like you're really struggling with this. And that's like the deeper cut, which is often like what's really going on beneath the surface. It's a really simple way to help people feel heard quickly. And that's like 10 minutes, and then you can switch and do it the other way around. Another really simple format is if someone is talking about something that is difficult for them, pause them, like actually say, hey, can you pause just a second? I want to hear this, but do you want me to listen, ask questions, or give advice? This is super powerful. I've been using it a ton recently because we usually have a predisposition towards one of those. And each person needs something different. I have friends that really want me to give advice when they're saying something. Oftentimes I want that. But if somebody doesn't want that, they're going to feel like they're being told something. They're being imposed on. So asking this question, either after someone speaks or ideally while they're talking, so you know what frame to put on, is really, really helpful. Can change a lot of relational dynamics. And the last piece of this is don't save support. So I'll click back to this last one. So the idea of this is nonviolent communication, which is actually where we created the empathy game out of, has this idea of emotional slavery, that we're oftentimes kind of enslaving ourselves to someone else's emotions. We're basically saying, okay, if you feel something, then I am obligated to react to it. And I think if someone else feels something, if I love them, I'm obligated in a way to care about it, or I obligate myself to care about it, but not necessarily to take it on. There's a difference between like compassion and merging in the kind of Buddhist philosophy, which is compassion is like witnessing someone else, but not absorbing their emotions into you. If you find yourself getting stressed or anxious, insecure, whatever, because somebody else is feeling a thing, you can't actually help them. You're merged. You don't have that distance. And so if you notice yourself doing that, just kind of take a step back. And like, for me, it's just noticing what's happening in my own body, like drawing my attention back into myself. What's happening here? And if you feel like you can't be fully present for them, or you're always the one that's supporting people around you, I fall into this with my family sometimes where I'm like, I will be all of your counselors. I know how to listen. I know how to empathize. It's my life's work. Like, call me up for anything. And then I find that like, I'm draining myself, and I'm also making them dependent on me to respond. And I'm not always able to respond. So help people find someone else in their life that can be that for them, whether that's a therapist or a friend that they can talk to, like actually assisting them in finding a listening ear is really powerful. Something else that you can do, we've got this platform Connect that I mentioned, that we've got like a Connection Buddies program that people can sign up for to do one-on-one. But something I've really liked doing recently is like, even within my group of friends, I've created a Facebook group during COVID for my friends in the households that are connected. There's about 30 people. And one of the things I've done on groups like that is to set up a connection buddies program, which is like, you ask everyone, do you want someone to talk to for, the next week or month? If they say yes, you just kind of randomly assign them to someone else, and that's their connection buddy. And they get to set up like when they want to talk to that person. But helping people have someone to check in with can be a valuable way of making sure that you're not their only support. And sometimes for me, that's actually a hard line. Like, I can't be that person for you only, because there's going to be times that I can't be there, and that's going to be painful. Okay. So next piece of this is, drum roll please, maintaining connection, play, and curiosity. A few points on this. So the first is intentional time. How many of you have had the experience of like, you're trying to connect with someone and they're on their phone or they're on their computer, or like, you ask them later and they have no idea what you actually said. Like, you feel like they're not present with you. Even if they are like looking at you, it's obvious that their mind is somewhere else. For me, that tends to feel really like frustrating and disorienting. Like, why am I bothering? And sometimes I don't even notice, because I have so much on my mind that like, I'm like, this is natural. Like, of course I'm thinking about other things while I'm with you. What am I supposed to do? Like, drop everything and just like be with you? Like, that's kind of selfish, don't you think? Connection is selfish. So really making an effort to have to maybe differentiate, like, when you're spending time with someone and you don't have full attention, and when you're spending time with them, you do. There's a great phrase that a friend of mine used to use for this, where when her partner was like not fully present in that way, they would say that he was hunting. He's kind of like, going out on the path and like finding different things, and his attention is diffuse and wide. So whenever she would come up to him and want his attention, if he said hunting, that meant that like he couldn't give her his full attention. Didn't mean she couldn't interact with him, but she just knew that she wouldn't get his full attention. So put aside, if you're going to try to have an intentional connection with someone, intentionally put aside time, schedule it in advance, or ask the person like, hey, do you have a couple minutes? I'd really love to just sit down one-on-one, no phones, no distractions. One thing you can do to make this easier is like, take 5 minutes before you start and each write down all of the things that you're tracking, that you're aware of, that could be distracting you. Write it down and put it somewhere where you can pick it up after the conversation. It kind of tricks your brain into going, oh, okay, like, I'm not getting rid of this. I don't have to forget about it. I'm just kind of pausing it for a while, and actually go and pick it up after the conversation, so you can like kind of be trustable to yourself. So a couple possible activities for intentional time. I'd actually love it. Like, feel free to put stuff in chat. Like, what do you do when you're trying to create like almost like date time with the people around you, whether it's friends or housemates or lovers or coworkers or whatever? Like, how do you make time that's just for that sort of rejuvenation? You can put some ideas in chat, and I'll give you a couple that I have. I'm stopping share for a moment because I don't know if we can all see the chat during that. A couple ideas that I have: read a book to each other, or a play and play different parts of it, or a book club, a book that you can each read separately and then discuss together. I'm doing that with my partner right now with this amazing book called Existential Kink. Not quite what it sounds like actually, but really great book about how to kind of reframe situations you're in a creative way. Make art together. Something my partner and I did recently is each of us have a lot of poems, and we wanted to take some of this time to make a book out of them. And so to make that collaborative, he wrote he had all the poems in a Google Doc, he printed them out, and I organized them and like cut them out. And that was a super cool art project to do together. You can make masks if you want to do a COVID thing. There's lots of really cool fabric patterns online right now with other people. Take walks, sing, or make music together. There's a singing game that I love playing called Bumblebee, where one person starts a song and the other person sings it with them for a couple lines, and then you stop and the other person starts singing whatever song comes to mind first hearing that, and then you all start singing that. You can do this with multiple people. It's kind of like the Transformer Bumblebee whose voice box was broken, and so he could only communicate through singing. That's a game you can try. I'll message that out afterwards too. A couple other games. There's a curiosity game. You just take 5 minutes each to ask the other person any questions you're genuinely curious about. If they don't want to answer one, they can pass. So I would ask for 5 minutes, then my partner would we'd kind of debrief for a minute or two, talk about what that was like, and then my partner would get to ask. It's kind of amazing how much more you find out when you just have permission to ask anything you want and there's a timer on. Another good game for that is called the Google game, where you say, if I Googled you and webinars, what would I find, for instance? Just choose a random word. And the other person acts almost as if they're a Google search box. Like, what's the first result? And in result, we're talking about like, what memory, what association, like what moment from your life, what does it mean to you? So if you have trouble getting curious, this can be a really good game to really simply find curiosity, because all you got to do is think of a random word and go back and forth with that for a while. And the last one I'll give is a game called I Don't Know About You. This is also a curiosity game. I like those if you can't tell. And it's really simple. You just say to the other person, I don't know blank. I don't know where you grew up. I don't know how you see the color red. I don't know what your favorite food is. I don't know if you were actually sad the other day or you were just tired. And you name all of these things. You don't answer them, but you use them as like fuel for like, what are the things you actually don't know? So those are a couple of games that you can play. I'm loving some of these ideas of what y'all have done, making dinner together and setting a fancy table outside, dressed up, Bob Ross painting night. Oh yeah, getting together and crafting, karaoke, drugs and drag, chatting about our younger selves and what kind of people we were, costumes. Yeah, these are beautiful. Okay, great. So a little bit, I'm just going to click back to the PowerPoint for a second. A couple more. So intentional time, games, intentional thought. And what I mean by this, and some of you had these kind of posted in chat, right? I imagine some of those activities took a little bit of setup. One of the things you can do while you're taking time for yourself is to think about how to love the people in your life best. Oftentimes, like, I want people in my life to put in time for me. I'm like, man, they haven't, like, my partner hasn't like asked me about my life recently, or like no one's reaching out to me and asking if I want to hang out. Like, obviously nobody cares. Like, nobody's doing anything special for me. And then I think back and I'm like, when's the last time I reached out to a friend just unprompted? When's the last time that I cooked my partner dinner or sent a note or did any of these things that I really want someone else to do for me? And when I think about it, actually, like, when is the last time they did that for me? And oftentimes I can remember multiple examples, but in the moment when my mind is upset about this, it's not going to remember. So I actually take a practice of regularly sitting down and asking myself, like, what can I do to make people in my life feel special and to create activities that I would really enjoy? Something I'll do, for instance, is like every couple months I'll send my partner this like fancy written out menu, because we're both chefs, this fancy menu of like, you know, you are invited to a dinner at the House of Ness, and the first course is this, and the second course is this, and the dessert we never get to anyhow, so fuck it. And it's just like, you know, a little thing. And this is really useful too if you consider someone's love languages. Like my grandma recently has been in the process of passing away, which has been a lot of intensity for me. And my mom reminded me that her love language is gifts. So before I went, I took some time and I know calligraphy. And so like I wrote a poem for her and I calligraphied it and I put it in a little book with a bunch of pictures from my childhood. And she loved it. And I wouldn't have thought of that without asking my mom, like, hey, like, what is it that grandma finds valuable? So you can interview other people in your life. Like, how do you love on the people around you? And even the process of considering that is going to open your mind to new ideas. Some other really cool ones. My housemate Khan has been doing crosswords with his brother. over the internet. They'll like call each other and they'll be doing a crossword together. We've done virtual dance parties together. Whenever one of us comes back, the other one will often like have a little welcome home note out. So really small things. Notes are really good. And one of the reasons to do this, like you may be thinking, well, I do these things all the time. Like I cook for people, I clean for people. Like I don't want to be always the one that's extending. One of the things is our minds notice difference more than they notice similarities. So if your form of love is to cook for someone, but you're cooking for them all the time, they're going to start taking it for granted. So, you could stop cooking for them for a while. That would be a difference. Or do something different than cooking one night. Like give them a message, give them a back massage, ask them some questions. Cool. And the last thing that I'm going to say is my favorite, which is challenge them to a duel. There's something about like just playful dueling, like, a finger duel where I don't know if y'all have played this game, but you kind of like hook your finger with the other person. You each have like a pointer finger out. You try to like poke the other person. That's a duel. A duel of like words or metaphor games, physical, mental. You can do an emotional duel kind of like, sometimes I'll play competitive curiosity where you go back and forth with questions and each question has to be either like more vulnerable or more specific than the last one that got asked. So like friendly competition, as long as you're both in it together, can be really cool. I have another friend who does these like quarantines parties where he'll get houses to, get together and you're each a quarantine and he makes up challenges and they do it like over Zoom with each other. So like as we're pent up, there's lots of emotions coming up too. And sometimes even like anger or irritation or fear, and giving that energy somewhere to go is really important. And if you can support each other in doing that, it's actually a great way to deepen your relationship. Because I think that we've got a real opportunity to come out of quarantine with deeper relationships than we have before. So I want to take just a second and let you like kind of think about any intentional activities that you might do with a partner. Just kind of write some down for yourself. And someone mentioned that John Gottman is a really good resource for connection questions. Yeah, he's got a card deck that you can download on your phone. I think if you look up John Gottman card decks, you'll find it has a lot of great questions and games. Once you have a couple ideas. The next thing that I want to talk about is boundaries. So we're going to go through two other points, which hopefully we'll have the time for, because I didn't fully time this out. So I'm going to just quickly talk about boundaries. And this content I'm actually taking directly from the Authentic Life course, which is something that I'll talk about a little bit at the end of the call, but it's when I spent a bunch of time about 2 years ago trying to figure out like, how do you translate authentic relating practices or conscious communication practices that work really well within close communities out into your life? And what I found is like, you can't just ask everyone like, hey, will you play a game with me? Because like in the middle of a work meeting, for instance, that's not appropriate. And sometimes there's not enough safety to create that. So I looked a little bit into like, what were the underlying rules and principles that make authentic communication work? And one of them is boundaries. So the first thing about boundaries, there's a difference between boundaries and rules. A boundary is a clear statement of where the other person can and can't go with you and potentially what action you'll take if they pass it. And you can only set a boundary for yourself when you set it against someone else, it becomes a rule, which is what happens when the other person has no freedom to choose their behavior. So for example, it's the difference between telling a child, if you run in the house, again, I'm putting you to bed without dinner, versus if you run in the house, I'm only going to cook for myself tonight and you'll have to get your own dinner. If you have power over someone else, rules can be traumatizing because they take the other person's freedom away. And if you don't have power over them, rules can be frustrating because the other person just isn't going to answer them. So that's boundaries versus rules. And then it's useful to examine why you want a boundary before you set it. An example is like, imagine that the neighbor's kids keep coming into your yard and you really want them to stay out of your yard. So you decide that you're going to build a fence between your yard and theirs. So you spend a bunch of time and money building this fence. And then the kids make a game out of climbing over the fence into your yard. And really the thing that you wanted was to keep the kids from coming into your yard. But if you don't set that directly with them and say what you'll do if they come into your yard, like, if you come into my yard, I'm going to squirt you with a squirt bottle every time. I don't know if this works on kids. Seems like it might, or just turn into a water fight, which would be fun anyways. So figuring out why you want the boundary and taking some time to journal and like, if you actually got this thing from the other person, would it resolve your problem? And is there something deeper that you're trying to figure out? And a lot of the time this is just done in little experiments. So for my housemate and I, it's like, you know, he has a request. Boundaries can be similar to requests too. He had a request for me to leave the living room cleaner or not leave things out in the living room. But that's a rule, right? It mandates my behavior. And so we were both clear that like, if keeping things out in the living room, like I'm doing a bunch of art projects there, if that's actually important to me, if I try to stop doing it, it's going to threaten something that I care about and I might not be able to follow through. So we basically set it as an experiment. I said, let's try this for a week. I'm going to keep the living room free of stuff. And at the end of the week, if that's really been rough for me or, you know, kind of screwed up something that I care about, I want to renegotiate. So renegotiating is always fine. And if the other person, similarly, if the other person can't keep a boundary, rather than getting angry at them, ask them, like, this is troubleshooting, ask them like, okay, what is it that is going on for you here? Like, is there something that is important to you that this boundary is in the way of? And again, that's something that we kind of go into deeper in the course, is like, how do you troubleshoot that? Because boundaries are a big topic, and they're one of the ways of, I talk about them because they're one of the ways of maintaining distance, even when you're really close to someone, is actually constructing these spaces for yourself, whether they're physical or like where somebody can and cannot go with you. So last piece of this is how to develop more authentic forms of communication, including talking about the tough stuff. And I'm imagining that some of you have had the same experience that I've had, both in quarantine and in my life, where there are tough conversations to have. Like, I've crossed someone else's boundary, they've crossed mine, I've upset them in some way, and we have to talk about it, or a relationship needs to end or change form. And especially when I'm under stress, that can be a really, really hard thing. So a couple of techniques for this. First is what I call relational hygiene. And what I mean by that is there's a practice that my housemate and I do once a week, and we still set aside time even now, because like intentional time is different than just bumping into each other throughout the day, even though we're doing that all the time now. And relational hygiene is like, you know, if you're going to wash your body, kind of wash your relationship, keep it clean. What we do is appreciations, withholds, and requests. So we go back and forth, and each of us, we start by sharing appreciations for each other, like something I've appreciated about you in the last week, and they can be things we've done with each other or things we've just witnessed each other do. So that puts us in a good frame. And then we go into withholds, withholds are things that you have withheld from the relationship that are affecting it, that you just haven't spoken to. So withhold might be like, you know, when you spoke harshly to me the other day, when you raised your voice, I was really upset. Like, I was in a rough space and I felt like disregarded. A withhold my partner shared with me last night, which was really tough to hear and also really insightful, was like, hey, I feel like, you know, I've been in a rough state and you just haven't paid attention to it. You've been really high energy and in your own stuff. I was like, whoa, God, ow. And also, I'm so glad to know that. Like, how many weeks would we have gone on with me just kind of being oblivious and high energy if I hadn't known that? And on kind of like on that theme, there's some clearing questions that you can ask if you're having trouble getting out these withholds. And by the way, it's appreciations, withholds, and then requests are like what you might like to do about it. So a withhold doesn't have to be connected to an action. A withhold can just be a share of this thing happened and this is how I felt about it. Requests are actions, like they can be boundaries, they can be requests, whatever. Clearing questions to kind of get these things out in the open if you have a hard time finding them. One I really like is, what's the elephant in the room? Just ask each other that, because a lot of the time you know what the thing standing between you is. So what's the elephant in the room? Or the one I asked last night kind of spontaneously was like we were getting into this argument and I couldn't figure out why we were in an argument, because I thought we were just figuring out whose house we were going to hang out at. And I was like, what's going on between us right now in your view? And it's really, behind these is just in that moment where you want to react, see if you can get curious. And that taking a step back from trigger is a really powerful tool. Two other things about this, how to be while you're having these clearings. First is go first. Like I said earlier when I was talking about, if you want other people to do kind things for you and take care of your emotions, like, have you done things for them? Have you been proactive in caring about them? It's the same thing when you're talking about emotions. You set the tone for each other. So if you want someone else to be vulnerable with you, take the impetus to be vulnerable with them first, because they will go as deep as you go, because we mirror each other. We take each other's cues on what is safe. So if you ask them, what's the elephant in the room? First, then say, here's what I think it is. And the last is listen generously. And two pieces to this. One is what we call assume positive regard. So assume that the other person is not out to screw you over or hurt you, even if you feel like that in the moment. But there's probably something they're trying to protect in what they value, maybe even in your relationship. So see if you can come from that perspective, or if you miss it, just come back to it. Like, hey, wait a second. Assuming that your actions make sense, why are you doing this? And that can be an internal process or an external one. And the second one that I use is like, I'm a super reactive person. I get angry pretty easily. And one thing that I do that really helps is like, when someone speaks and I notice that like anger or upset rising in me, I always reflect back what they said before I speak. A, because I might have heard it wrong, and B, because it gives me enough space for my reaction to fade. It's just a stalling technique a lot of the time, but it gives me enough space that I'm reflecting and considering and out of like my hindbrain basically when I speak, because we're activating different parts of our mind when we're in these triggered states. And you want to be in the part of your mind that has forethought and cognition, not in the part of the mind that is reactive. And sometimes that takes a second to get into. Okay, so, these are great. A couple questions in chat. Something I don't want to tell you is, that's a really great one. Okay, I'm gonna open it up to Q&A in a second, but I just want to give y'all some resources to walk away with. I'm gonna send out the games and questions and stuff I talked about on this call, kind of a script for what I talked about. But if you want more of a deep dive, there's two things. Laura posted a link to this in chat, but the Authentic Life course covers a lot of this same material that I talked about, but more deeply. It's a 9-week immersive course that's coached and done with triads and other people, where you'll go into boundaries, requests, how do you get curious about people, how do you have conversations with people that don't want to be authentic with you, getting feedback from people in your life. And I felt like we had already talked about doing this webinar kind of before the quarantine hit, and I felt kind of strange about pitching anything while I know a lot of people are in financial difficulty. And like, this is kind of my life's work and our life's work, and it feels to me more important now than ever. And I want to make it accessible. So basically, if you go to that link, just for coming on the call, there's a discount for $150 off the course. But if you're struggling because of getting hit by COVID, there's a link on that page that you can click that will automatically get you the course for half off, no questions asked. And if you need more of a scholarship, just contact us. Even though like we have to charge in order to keep our own business going, I feel like right now there's like kind of two front lines to the crisis. There's a physical and an emotional front line. The physical one we're spending a lot of energy on like helping our healthcare workers, but there's also a front line of keeping ourselves healthy and safe and our relationships healthy and safe. And that goes for even not during COVID times. And if you want to contact me, this is my email, sarah@authweb.com. Okay, so that's most of what I wanted to say, and we've still got a couple of minutes. So if anyone wants to ask questions, you can put them in chat. Might be better since there's a lot of us on the call, but you're also welcome to unmute yourself and ask. Okay, the difference between rules and boundaries. Yeah. And I can't 100% remember where I got this from, even though I usually like to attribute stuff. It might have actually been from literature on polyamory, which has a lot to say on this. But a rule is something that you set for someone else that pertains to someone else's behavior. And a boundary is something you set around yourself. So I could say, to my housemate could say to me, for instance, like, if you don't keep the living room clean, I'm going to trash the upstairs. That's something he's doing for himself. He's not mandating that I, don't keep the living room clean, because he doesn't have power over me technically. But a rule would be, you need to keep the living room clean. Yeah, hopefully I'm explaining that clearly enough. Okay, so 2 other questions in favorite connection question, and if the ALC has calls on this, and can I say more about it? The ALC is basically for the coached course, which is the ones, there's a coached and a self-paced. We have people tend to get best results with the coached one just because it's a lot more support. There's Q&A calls every week with a coach that's specific to your cohort, and then Q&A calls once a month with me. So 3 weeks out of the month, you have your own coach, and 1 week out of the month, you have to deal with me. And you can ask whatever you want in those. And then there's a lot of recorded content and assignments. And you also get put with a triad of people, or you can take the course with some other people in your life. And for every week, the assignments, there's usually one to do with yourself, one to do with your triad, which is kind of a safe space to practice in, and then one that you can do with people out in your life to practice. And favorite connection question. Oh gosh. I really like 2 of them. One, what are you passionate about? My housemate asked me a question on the hike yesterday that was super intense, which is like, what's a secret that you haven't shared? Or what's a secret you have? I wouldn't suggest that one until you're pretty deep with someone. But the other one I really like doing is like, when you ask someone like, hey, how are you? And they say, okay. I really like asking, what's the O and what's the K? And it really like gets people to share a lot more than they would. Okay, what platform did I use to connect multiple households together? I used primarily just a Facebook group. I tried using a spreadsheet as well, which had like, different houses and their levels of quarantine and offers and needs. But honestly, like just creating a Facebook group, putting everyone on it together, and a Facebook thread. And then every week I just post a question in the group and I say, hey, like, how is your house doing? And that has just created a lot of interaction. And then people have started posting like, I'm hosting a weekly Zoom call for this, or I found Cards Against Humanity online and I said, hey, does anyone want to play? And we got on Zoom and played Cards Against Humanity. So really simple. I found that like I tend to over-engineer stuff, but just putting people together and being consistent about reaching out is most of what you need. Would you be open to sharing advice on how to determine whether the boundary must look like cutting someone out completely? Yeah, boundaries are a big topic. I think there's like a whole lesson or module on them in the course because it's real complicated. Something that happens a lot in kind of conscious community is this story like, well, if I'm going to practice good communication, I have to stay in contact with this person. Like cutting someone out of my life is not good communication. So one of my mentors has a phrase that's like commitment to connection versus commitment to relationship. Commitment to relationship is commitment to the form of something, like we are partners or we are housemates. And sometimes we can get more attached to the form than we are to the function. Like, what is this in service of? And is it serving that? Like if being housemates is in service of feeling safe and grounded, is our housemateship serving that? And having conversations from that level, like, what are our values and needs, and are those getting met? And if not, how do we reevaluate? And if you're consistently feeling drained and you can't have those conversations with someone, and I would suggest, if you can, like finding a third party to just listen in, even if they don't say anything before you break off something, because sometimes it's easy to get into a dynamic with someone else, and you can do this over video. You can definitely set a boundary and cut off connection. And if you can do that with like spaciousness and speaking it to like what is like the shared value that both of you have, in a way, like, hey, both of us, it seems like both of us want like a caring and open connection and to have like a pretty easeful life, and it just doesn't seem like we're getting that with each other. And so I'm going to set a boundary of not contacting you for a month, and I'm not going to respond to any messages you send to me. And that's a boundary, not a rule. You're not telling them, don't contact me. Because if you tell them don't contact you and they contact you, what are you going to do? Like, you can block them maybe, but that can kind of get messy. If you're just like, this is what I'm going to do, it also puts you more in power. So oftentimes you might feel more spacious from there. Advice for Zoom connections with strangers. If you go to Medium and look up my name, medium.com, I just wrote a whole guide to leading connection events over Zoom. And the third part of that has a couple of games specifically for leading over Zoom that are pretty good to use with strangers as well. And I'll be posting more of those. If you take the course or if you join the AuthorEv list, I'm going to try to send out a new game every couple of days or every week or so that people can use, a couple of them to use online. Cards Against Humanity charades, that's fantastic. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, thank you for posting the article that I referenced. Particular advice for very new relationships. I think I might need a more specific question. So if you want to post that in chat, I'm going to answer some other ones in the meantime. When talking with people in our lives who are not familiar with AR approach to the communication, how do you sometimes temper that? A lot of people in my life would be unfamiliar and shut down. On one of the other webinars and in the course as well, I tell this awesome story about trying to connect with my brother, who's like very much not AR. So definitely have dealt with that before. And my top recommendation for it is that authentic relating, or any sort of conscious communication, there's two parts. There's authenticity and there's relating. And usually what we focus on is authenticity. Like, how can I be most honest with you? How can I get you to be most honest with me? But the relating piece is super valuable. And when relating, it's not just relating in authentic relating communication, it's figuring out using those tools of authenticity and curiosity to figure out how the other person communicates and using that language. So with my grandma, like, she communicates, like, giving gifts to her is her way of showing love and receiving love. She will never explicitly, I can't get the feeling that she loves me. She doesn't transmit in that way. She might say it, but it's kind of in passing. But I can see from the things that she gives me and the experiences that she creates, like, that's her form of love. And I can't have like an authentic revealed conversation with her, but I'm just going to mute whoever that is. I can't have an authentic revealed communication with her, but I can sit down with her and ask her stories, or like talk about things from our childhood, or, give her things that are meaningful to her. That's speaking her language. And often you'll find that if you speak someone else's language for long enough, you can start getting them to speak yours too, but you have to. Okay, so a couple more questions. When was the last time you did something for the first time in response to an inner yearning to fulfill and define your purpose? Damn. Okay. Got to think about that, asking me to be vulnerable now. Okay, something I discovered recently. I've been taking this beautiful course by my friends at an organization called Human Systems, and they do a lot of work on defining values and looking at how our feelings are indicative of our values. I talk about that a little bit in the first module of the ALC too, but they go much more into it. Something I discovered as I was doing that is I thought that I had this value on building community, And actually, the higher value I have is on creation. Like, I really like making things, but I don't really like sustaining them. And so the experiment I've tried is actually like taking a little bit more time away from maintaining my community and spending a little more time on making things. Like spending a lot of time writing that Zoom guide instead of like taking time to like call my friends over the weekend. And it's been really edgy. Like it's felt like I'm letting people in my life down, but it's also given me a lot of energy back. Okay, so we're about at the top of the hour. If you have more questions, feel free to email me. And I really loved seeing everyone here. Thank you so much for showing up. I wish you all luck with the next couple weeks and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Sarah.